Good evening. I'm Michelle Caruso Cabrera. This is the Kudlow Report. First up tonight, a new report from NBC News' investigative reporter Lisa Myers says businesses across the country are cutting employees' hours to avoid paying health care costs from Obamacare. The White House has been telling a different story, though. Take a listen.
The data reflects that there is not support for the proposition that businesses are not hiring full-time employees because of the Affordable Care Act.
Add this to all the delays and changes to Obamacare. It sure seems like the law is crumbling under its own weight. Look at all those delays. The small business exchange, the employer mandate, the eligibility verification. Here now to break it all down is Mark Hanna, a Democratic analyst and a former campaign aide for both John Kerry and President Obama, health policy expert Betsy McCoy, author of the book Beating Obamacare. Lady and gentlemen, thanks for joining us so much. Lisa Myers does a story, surveys many small businesses across the country, more than 20, and they tell her that they are cutting employees' hours to get them below the 29 hours in order to not have to provide health insurance. What do you say to that, Mark?
Right. The company she surveyed was Subway, which has been out on the vanguard.
She surveyed 20 businesses across the country.
Right. And small business, let's remember that this only applies to businesses that employ more than 50 people. So these are medium-sized businesses. Small family-owned businesses aren't going to be necessarily affected by this. And, you know, this has been a Republican talking point since the rollout of Obamacare.
So you're saying that it's a talking point and it's not true, that if you have employees that were working more than 30 hours, now you're cutting them? That's not happening?
Sure. And don't take my word for it. There's a senior vice president at ADP, the payroll company, who points out that the costs, the administrative costs, the costs of hiring, retaining, attracting people, the cost of managing a large fleet of part-time staff will be prohibitive, and many companies will continue to hire full-time employees who are dedicated, who are talented.
That's beside the point as to whether or not an employee who used to have 30 hours now only has 25.
Right. And what he's saying is that there's going to be incentives for companies to make sure that they're hiring people full-time. People will want to work. And let's also remember there are a lot of really
Let me point out that this is not anecdotal. The latest federal jobs report shows 4 times as many part-time jobs created as full-time jobs. That's the reverse of what we usually see.
But the problem there is that not enough full-time jobs are
all across the country. Americans are having to cobble together a living for themselves and their families out of 2 or 3 part-time jobs and no benefits instead of a full-time job. And it's not just small family businesses, municipalities, community colleges, state governments, the Commonwealth of Virginia, all kinds of public sector employers are also doing this.
Let's be clear. They put the 29-hour cutoff for a reason, right? Because 40 hours is usually full-time work. But the administration wanted part-time employees to get health insurance. That's not happening. Instead, they're having their hours
It's happening among a lot of really impressive companies, like Costco pays its part-time or covers health insurance for its part-time workers. So does Target. So does Starbucks. So does Home
huge
Depot.
Corporations, businesses that are just getting started.
They have no choice, by the way. They have no choice. But let me just point out
they do have a choice. Starbucks has been doing that since 1988, and it's been been a case study of corporate social responsibility and good business.
The aggregate numbers show that Americans are losing full-time job opportunities and being pushed down.
The causality of that hasn't been established.
Pushed down to part-time status, and it's happening coincidentally just when the employer mandate was supposed to kick in. I just want to point out that even though that employer mandate has been delayed for a year, that wasn't any kind of relief. It was really a kind of whiplash, because what employers will be penalized for, the size of their workforce next year, depends on how many employees they have this year. So they're pushing down to part-time status now, despite the delay in the employer mandate.
Let me get back to the point you just made about there's no causality established.
Right.
We understand intuitively, right? When big brand new TVs go from costing $2,000 to $200, more people buy them.
Right.
When governments want to stop people using cigarettes and liquor, they raise the taxes, they raise the cost. So why isn't it intuitive to people that when you raise the cost of labor, there will be less of it?
Michelle, you don't have to intuit, because hundreds of business owners have testified to Congress and shown that this mandate adds $1.79 an hour every hour to the cost.
It's going to, because it's,
service personnel.
Look, I understand that covering somebody with health insurance costs $8,000, but covering people for the cost of administrative, recruitment, if you have people leaving the workforce, kind of coming and going, that costs just as much. Now, what's happening here is that when the economy is soft, as it is now, part-time employment increases. That's the causality.
We're not talking about. We're talking about part-time employees who actually have less hours than they did before.
Right.
I'm not talking about the level of part-time employment.
Right.
I'm talking about people who are going to have fewer hours even when they weren't full-time.
So Marco Rubio, Republican from Florida, as we all know, has come out and said 75% of companies are going to fire or make their employees part-time as a result of Obamacare. That was called a pants on fire by the PolitiFact, the online fact-checking website. That was so egregious a lie.
Who cares?
Because we're giving the Republican talking points, and we all forget that
I'm looking at
Obamacare.
Republican talking
I'm looking at the federal labor statistics.
Only by you.
This is based on Romney Care in my home state of Massachusetts.
Who cares what it's based on? The fact is it's having a very negative impact. It doesn't matter whose idea it was.
What are you talking about? It's had a terrible
let me
impact
point
on
out,
small
Michelle,
business.
Tell me where.
Another very negative impact of this, these constant changes in what the law says. The president is hacking away at the Constitution, and
the Constitution of the United States of America?
Undermining the rule of law.
This is the law. This is a law of the land that was passed in a democratic process.
What the president has done is not in this
That's the law, by the way.
The president does not have.
What is this?
That is the Obama health law. But Article 2, Section 3 of the Constitution says the president will faithfully implement the law, not change the deadlines for the law or pick and choose which parts of the law he executes. And that is what this president has done over the last 3 weeks.
That is a big discussion for another separate discussion for another night. Betsy, thank you so much.
Very bad for business.
Thank you so much as well. A real pleasure.